What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC podcast. For those of you who are new tuning in, this is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast. I am your host, Brandon Zachary, here with my co host, Matt Owens. We talk all things mental performance in sports, so we're excited to get back with another episode today. Matt, how we doing, buddy?
Can't complain, man. Back again. Looking forward to a good episode today.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interviews in the last a lot of episodes, I should say. So excited to kind of get more one-on-one conversations with you. This will be fun going back and forth, and we're going to talk about a topic today that we think is timely because we're now in April, and the topic we're going to talk about today is staying present during the long season. Particularly when I'm referring to April now being the long season, I'm talking about baseball, talking about college baseball. Now high school's kicking into gear, especially in the Northeast. And then we got Major League Baseball that's got the ball rolling. And, baseball, especially long seasons, I think this can be applicable to any sport. But we're going to go back and forth and talk a lot about how we're able to stay present during the season because we know how taxing and draining it can be. So, yeah, very excited to get into this. But, Matt, I know you're in your season, obviously, and it's definitely a grind. It's a physical grind, but also a mental grind, especially for you as a coach, big time mental grind. So we're going to go into both being a player and a coach throughout the season. Kind of any tips and tricks that Matt and I have had throughout our time playing, how we were able to stay present, how you're able to detach a little bit. So definitely excited going into that. But Matt, I guess the first way to kick it off is let's go to the worst possible scenario. We're getting a little bit of adversity here, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of college playoffs, conference playoffs get structured a little differently. Some conferences, every team makes the conference playoff. Some conferences, a select few. Some conferences, half. Some conferences, two best teams go to the conference championship. It's all different. But anyway, let's throw this theoretical out there. You're a team, maybe during the regular season, you didn't perform very well. You didn't perform up to your expectations, but now you got a shot at the conference playoff. You're going into conference playoff, right? How do you not let those negative emotions from maybe not living up to expectations, not, I guess, performing at your highest level during the regular season, but now you have this special opportunity going into conference playoffs to, potentially win the conference and then hopefully make it to a regional out of there. How do you manage those negative, I guess, thoughts and processes from the regular season?
Yeah, I think it's especially when you're a team that you haven't done well, you make playoffs. It's kind of like you almost feel like you're not supposed to be there more than but everybody else that's looking at you, the one seeds, the two seeds, they're looking at you like you're the win, like you're the counter. Like if we face them, like it's an easy win. We'll move on to the next round, right? So like for that team and like those sets of players, coaches, it's like I think it's super important that you just kind of realize that it's like you're playing with house money at that point in time, right? Everyone else is already counting you out. So like what you do next, if you lose, people expect you to lose, right? Not that you go out there and like you kind of just like wave the white flag, but at the same time, there's no pressure on you to then go out and get a win or anything like that. So you could be a little bit more free, you could be a little bit more loose than, the one seed that has to live up to the billing, the two seed that has to live up to the billing. Like you can go into that playoff and almost breathe some fresh air. Like if you thought it was a nightmare season and here you are in the playoffs, like the nightmare's over. Like it's a new day, right? And like I think that's the thing. It's like you'll start to see, players and teams that have these like Cinderella moments and everything like that. It's because they also know it's like, hey, we're just kind of here. Like we're gonna have fun. We're gonna go out. We're just gonna play at that point in time. And like those can be the most dangerous teams once you get to an actual playoff and everything like that. Just because, like I said, you're not really supposed to be there to everybody else, right? So, that's kind of how that goes for the most part.
Yeah, I'd say once you get to conference playoffs, whether you had a great season or you had a terrible season, once you're in, and
You're in.
you almost got to take it as a whole new season, right? Like we did this during the regular season, but now it's anyone's game, and I feel like coming from a coach's perspective too, all game plans go out the window once you're in conference playoffs. Everyone's structured differently. Some have one like double elimination tournaments, some have series, some have one game and you're out. Kind of depends on whatever structure you're in. But this also goes for like what any of the other sports or like in the MLB, in high school, right? Like once you get there, once you're in the playoffs, even if your regular season didn't meet up to expectations, now you're in playoffs. Now, pitchers, you're throwing all of your best guys no matter what. There's no saving the bullpen. It's win at all costs. It's fighting for one another. And I feel like that can give life to a team that might not have lived up to expectations previously. And I feel like the way you stay present with that is um, it's also a reframing of the mindset where there's probably a lot of negativity that went on during the regular season if you didn't live up to expectations, whether that's from coaches, teammates, yourself intrinsically, if you're at a bigger school, media, whatever it is, you're dealing with some sort of pressure on yourself, and there is some sort of negativity that comes with that. But once you get in the playoffs, it's like you can reframe it as here's new life, here's a new
Right.
season, here's new everything, right? It's like this is the opportunity that we needed. It's a redo button basically. It's like all right, like we're not getting the at large bid in college, but we win the conference, we're getting to the regional. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like it's a beautiful thing that you can kind of go into that. But then on the other side, how do you not get too elevated and too high on your horse when maybe you had an awesome season? Maybe, you lost 5 games. You went 30-5 during the regular season and now you're going into conference playoffs. How do you not get too high on your horse? How do you manage that? Because I feel like it's good to have that confidence going in, knowing, listen, we have a body of work that shows we're a winning program and we're going to continue to do that. But also, you can't take any of these teams lightly. Like you just said, you could be a 1 seed playing a 6 seed in a conference tournament, but that 6 seed's fired up and they just got new life. And now this is what they're playing for and they're amped up. How do you not play into that and let that 6 seed get that life?
Yeah, I think, especially if you're the one, right? Obviously, you did a lot of things right to get to that point. It's really just kind of falling back on, what you did to get there, right? Like, if we're keeping it on the baseball side of things, it's not trying to do too much to win that game. It's doing what's necessary to go out and, like, win that game. And I think the most dangerous thing, especially when you get to conference tournaments, regionals, everything like that, is like you can't count games. At the end of the day, you can't be like, okay, like, we're going to face team A and they're an 8 seed. Okay, cool. Like we'll see such and such, but it's really about be a dogfight in the second round when we
Yeah.
face team B, right? Like you can't worry about the next day, you can't worry about the next game. Like you have to give everything you have into that game. It's almost like every game once you get into conference championships, regionals, everything is game 7. Honestly, it needs to be treated as such. Like there is no tomorrow. You got to do what you need to do right now, today, in this moment, win it, and then move on to the next one, and just kind of go from there. But you see it all the time. You've seen 1 seeds in the March Madness tournament always fall. It's stuff like that where it's like it's not that those teams don't take it, don't take it serious once they get to that point. It's just that it's easy to then look for past a 16 seed. Everyone's beat the 16 seed in March Madness, right? Until they didn't, until it stopped happening. And then it's like, okay, now it's like if you just approach that guy like you would if you faced another 1 seed in the Final Four, then okay, now we're talking. Like you're probably going to win by a pretty decent margin at that point in time. But yeah, it's a blessing and a curse to be the 1 seed. You're hunted, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to own that for the most part.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to the quote that like confidence comes in preparation, and you have a body of work throughout the whole season that showed your process worked. And I think a lot of people going into the playoffs, whether it's coaches or players, you get that extra sense of nervousness or an extra sense of I got to do more, or it's playoffs, we got to change stuff, we got to try to do something new because we're in this like we just said, this new season, this new chapter of our season, right? We need to implement something new. It's like, listen, if it ain't broke, like don't try to fix it. Like get after it, do what you do well. And I feel like we've been a part of so many teams. We've seen so many teams that, they're amazing. And then it's just one little thing, it could be the first inning where your team that, is aggressive. And then all of a sudden your 1 through 3 hitters are taking pitches where they normally wouldn't. They're swinging at bad pitches when they normally wouldn't. It takes one inning to kind of snowball into something. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
it could take one of your guys to do that where it turns into two and then it turns into three. Could be your pitcher, same thing. Like all year, I've been working fastball first inning, like trying to go fastball changeup. That's it. Now he's like, all right, maybe I'll try to work backwards in the first inning. It's like, all right, well, if you haven't done that all year, there's no point trying to break that out in the playoffs.
Right.
Like it all comes with your preparation. And I also think the beautiful thing about either being the 1 seed or the lower seed is you all have the same amount of break basically before your conference playoff, at least from my um, experience with college baseball, right? It's like you end your conference play, all the records are out, you see if you made the conference tournament or not. Great, you did, perfect. Everyone kind of has that same schedule, that same routine, right? And then it's like, all right, now we have a week to prep and get ready for this, right? Let's do it. And that's where it can be, listen, we're the 1 seed for a reason. Our process works. Let's continue to maintain this and do it. Don't try to do anything special. Let's just keep doing what works. And then on the flip side, if you're the 6 seed, it's like, all right, well, let's look back, see what did work this season. Might not have been the prettiest season. We might not be super thrilled with it, but what did work? Okay, let's drill that in practice this week. Let's do this. My mental prep's got to be on point. Now, obviously, we talk about mental performance a ton. And I'd love to hear it from the coach's perspective because obviously you and I had this when we were in like the playoffs for Camden County, and we're kind of getting ready for that. How do you mentally, as a coach, prep for playoffs? Because I know everyone says right, like once you get to playoffs, it's not any different than the regular season, but I think we can be completely honest, it is different, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And I think trying to push it off that it's not almost does a disservice. I
Right.
think understanding that the stakes are higher is okay, but that doesn't mean that you have to change anything or be someone you're not. I feel
Right.
like there's a disconnect there. So, as a coach, how do you kind of get ready for that? Because, again, at the end of the day, you win the conference as a coaching staff, that's phenomenal. As a team, that's phenomenal. You're going to get the regional bid. It's very important, and you can't say it's not. So, how do you go into the playoffs and be like, all right, let's go into this with a level head, understanding that there is pressure going into this because of the stakes that are at hand, but also knowing what works for us and knowing what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as coaches, you kind of talk about that all throughout the course of the year. So, like, when you get to that point, it's just about, like, just doing what, not necessarily, like, what you've been doing, but
Yeah.
pretty much just, like, the groundwork's been laid. Like, I think in playoffs, it's more of the player's time rather than the coach because, you'll see who kind of rises and who kind of crumbles underneath that type of pressure. As a coach, like, if you're coaching first or third or whatever, like, the send you made in game 5 of the season is probably the same send you're going to be making like in the playoffs and everything like that. Like the game doesn't change itself. I think a lot of the prep work kind of going into like those playoff games and everything is more as a coach is just making sure that your players are just kind of taken care of and they're on the right path and like they understand, what it is that needs to be done because there's always going to be that 1, 2, 3 guys in the locker room that is just like you said, like I've been fastball changeup all season. Let me start mixing in some sliders and everything. So like your job is pretty much not necessarily to police it, but just to make sure like those guys are like they understand like what you did this year worked.
Yeah.
What you do in playoffs will probably work as well. But what we can't do is change up repertoire. We can't change up mechanics. We can't change up X, Y, and Z. Like it's just about like executing the same things that you've been executing the whole season and just kind of, checking in on your processes and just making sure that all of those just are in line so that when the game does come, like you're all playing at a high level, coaches all the way down to your last player and everything.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. You touched on it with guys, is making sure that their routines stay the same. That there is no Well, I'm going to add this during my BP. I'm going to add this in my bullpens now. I'm going to try these different things. That is not the time to do that, right? That's
Right.
where you got to just go out and compete. And that's the
Hmm.
point, right? All of the prep work that will lead you to be successful in the playoffs was built over the course of the season, right? So that's what's going to get you ready for the playoffs. It's not, hey, we got 1 week to get ready for the playoffs. Like, let's do this. It's
Right.
the course of learning from what you did throughout the year, what worked and what didn't. And if you're a team that didn't perform very well during the year, and it's like, okay, well, when we were playing our best, what worked? What were we
Right.
doing? How were we preparing? And then you can kind of try to implement that and do some things that way. And again, once you get a little bit of momentum in those conference playoffs, man, it is dangerous. Like
Hmm.
you don't want to play those teams that are in there because they just barely squeaked in and then they're getting hot at the right time. Like
Right.
whatever it is, it baseball, football, basketball, you don't want to play the teams that got hot at the right time. I mean, Ohio State at the end of the year for football, the last college football season, at the end of the year they were just
Scorching.
unbelievable. And then, during the season, they lost to Oregon. They won a very close game with Penn State. Like they didn't look like the far and away best team in college football. And then once you got to the playoffs, it was like no one even stood a chance. It was
Right.
crazy. It's like
Yeah.
once that ball rolls, it's like it's game over. They lost to Michigan. That was a
Hmm.
terrible loss. And it's
And that's
like,
what set him up.
yeah, once it snowballs, you can't stop it, man.
It's true. It's the truth. I mean, like that loss for them to Michigan, like everyone, oh, you can't lose that game. Oh, that's the biggest game of the year. Oh, your
Yep.
coach should get fired and everything. And like
Yep.
you saw a group of guys just kind of like rally around their coach, rally around their culture, rally around their program, and like it led to a national championship. Like on paper, if you asked anybody in August, they probably would have told you Ohio State was like the best team. But it's just like
Of course.
going through the regular season, it's ebbs and flows. Like you might be hot, you might be, winning, but you might not be playing your best ball. And then all of a sudden, like at the end of the year, like you get to see like what works and what doesn't. And it was almost like they lost to Michigan, kind of like went away for a little bit, and it's like you got to see them like not play, and then you knew they were going to be in the college football playoffs, and the next thing you know, they pop up, win round one, win round two, win round three, they win the championship, right? Like it just kept going, and like the team that they struggled with, before they weren't struggling with anymore. Like they were clicking on all cylinders. Like they had a time to reflect and kind of take a step back and like get away from what the expectations were, and then just be able to just go out and play and everything. And like that loss at the end of the year made them national champions. I mean, it made them the most dangerous
Yep.
team
Yeah.
in
It
the
did.
country.
It was unbelievable. But you mentioned something important in there when you're talking about their season with the ebbs and flows. And like now I think we touched on the playoffs. It's like, all right, even if we didn't perform the best during our regular season, even if Ohio State lost to Michigan, all right, we're in the dance, right? We got a shot. Let's see if we can make the most of it. But you talked about throughout the season. It's a long season, no matter what it is. Baseball, football, basketball, all very long seasons and very emotionally draining, mentally draining, physically draining, right? Now, how do you stay present throughout the year? And I feel like there are some tips that I've heard, there's some tips that I've read that I've implemented in my daily life now that even though I'm not playing, it's still helpful when you're working on things that take a long time, things that are a process. And I wanted to know when you played, or have you ever seen with guys, certain tips or tricks, I guess, that you can, I guess, implement or suggest to people that might help them through, like, we're in the smack dead middle of the season, man, and it's, we're practicing, we're playing 4 or 5 times a week. We're kind of in this flow where it's, you're busy. If you're in the Northeast, it's like cold one day and rainy, then it's warm the next day. It's like hard to get a read, but obviously throughout that whole process, you got to be at a certain level in order to perform every single day. Like, do you have any tips or tricks maybe that people can implement? Because I have a few thinking about it right now, but I'm thinking, what do you have anything that you implemented when you played or saw other people implement?
Yeah, I think when I played, just kind of like taking a step back, that was kind of the best thing for me personally.
Yeah.
Going to practice, give it everything you have, take a step back. Like, don't think about it for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big stat checker either, so like whatever I ended up with, like I kind of found out at the end of the year.
Yeah.
There were
Yeah.
times earlier, in college where they're 18, 19 years old, and you're like, let me check how I'm
Yeah. Let
hitting
me
today.
see.
Like
Let me see how they look.
yeah, like you're hitting how you're feeling, bud. Like
Yeah.
that's usually how it goes. So it's like, if you think if you're like, oh, yeah, I'm not hitting that well, your numbers probably reflect it. If you're like, I'm
Yeah.
hot, you don't check your numbers when you're hot. You check your
Yeah.
numbers when you're kind of
No.
like in that middle ground, or like when you're like on the lower end and everything, because you're just like, all right, what do I need
Yeah.
to kind of bounce back up, right? So like,
Yeah.
and that's not being present at the end of the day, because it's just
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
so worried about like you're carrying luggage at that point, like what you did in the past. You got to look at it today and like be like, okay, what do I need to do tomorrow, right? Now you're worried about like yesterday, and you're worried about tomorrow, and you're not worried about like today, right? And like that's kind of how it kind of led for me, just to be able to like attack it and everything. And I had one class in college that did really well for my mental state, and just kind of like, one analogy that the teacher used was about a boat, right? So it's like, if you are, let's say you're on April 15th, right? If you're on April 15th, and the calendar turns to April 16th, if you're still thinking about what happened in last week's game, you're on April 7th, right? And like, but someone else's boat has now passed you because they're on the 16th. You're still on the 7th, right? So it's like you got to kind of like row your way out of that into another day, into another day, like into another day, until you catch up to like the actual like present time. And then you can start to move forward now at that point. But like, you'll never be in a different day than the actual day is, unless you actually are thinking that way. And so like that was the one thing that like really helped me, was just kind of like, okay, like what I do today is what I do today. What I do tomorrow, I'll worry about that when I get into tomorrow and everything. So just kind of like approaching, practices, approaching games, approaching just kind of like, your extra work in that nature just kind of helped me for the most part and everything.
Yeah, I completely agree with detaching after games, after practices. I think one of the best things that me and my teammates did in college, and me and my housemates that all played with me at TCNJ, like after a game, after practice, whatever it was, like we're on the couch in our house just playing video games. We're like doing anything but talking about the game.
Yep.
Obviously you get home, you're talking about the game for a little bit, right? It's natural, obviously. It's something you all really care about and are passionate about. But then once 45 minutes hits, it's like, all right, it's done, let's go play some video games, let's go hang out, let's go chat, let's go like be
Yeah.
human. Another detachment is like after the game, after practice, your parents come to a game, like go out to eat with your parents. Maybe make a rule with your parents, be like, hey, let's go out to eat, let's talk about anything but baseball, right? And I feel like that could be good for both, when you pitch well, when you don't, when you play well, when you don't, because you know there's what good is going to come out of you pitch really well, and then you're at dinner and everyone's like, oh, you pitched so great, look at all these pitches worked for you, and you're like going through it all, replaying it all in your head with your parents, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying don't have any conversations at all, but there needs to be some sort of detachment, or else it's just going to keep consuming your mind, and it's going to be on your head all night, all day. And you need that piece where you can kind of take a step back. And even though you care so much, and I feel like in college, that's where I got lost, and probably you did as well, where if you're not thinking about it, your young brain is like, well, if I'm not thinking about it, then I don't care. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
and I think it's the opposite. I think in order for you to give everything you got, like you said, in practice, and give everything you got in the games, you have to be able to be like, all right, well, I'm going to turn the baseball brain off now for a couple hours and just
Mm.
relax and enjoy being me. Because also, it affects everything. It affects then the way that you're getting rest at night. It's the way that your body's going to get rest. I mean, I am example A for after a start, something didn't feel weird. What am I doing? I'm doing dry reps in my bedroom. I'm doing dry reps in the living room, trying to feel stuff out. And it's like, okay, like maybe that's not the best thing, because then when I'm laying in the bed, it's like, all right, now my brain's firing. I'm thinking about all these
Hmm.
different things. I'm looking up on Instagram, like, how do I fix these things on my mechanics? It's like, you're not going to figure out any of those things when you're laying in bed at night, just, after a bad start, trying to fix things in that moment, right?
Yep.
It's a process and it's something you got to implement every day. But I think you kind of got to implement those times to detach away from the sport, which I wish when I was younger I was better at, but I definitely was not. It was definitely on the brain much more often.
Oh yeah, and like that's the thing. It's just like you said about like sleep, and I know we talked about this in like an earlier podcast too. It's just like if you're so consumed with one thing, like it's taken away from like other things, right? So like
Yeah.
especially like a college baseball player, like you got class, you have family and relationships, and then you also have like the sport, you have teammates, and then you also have like the experience of like actually being in college. And like if you're only thinking about like baseball, like for some guys that might be what they need. Other people,
Yeah.
it's gonna, like you said, disrupt their sleep. It's gonna, disrupt the grades. It's gonna disrupt the classroom because they're not worried about studying. They're worried about like, all right, how do I
Yeah.
not punch 0-2, or how do
Yeah.
I go backside, or how do I get my curveball over, first pitch and everything like, and then you're like, oh man, shoot, I forgot to do my Spanish homework, and then now you got to worry about catching up because now like I can't get a bad grade in this. I got to keep my GPA up. So then it's like everything just starts to spin and everything. So it's like, especially from like a college perspective, like the detachment aspect is like I feel like it's a key. Honestly, just being able to like enjoy what's around you because like it's such a valuable place. Like you're only going to be in that spot one time in your life, and then you're going to have that happen 4 times, and then you're done, and then like you go off into like the actual like real world and everything. And it's like, be able to take a step back and like realize like that's not what defines you. It's not, it's not a soul sucker. Like just
Yeah.
leave it alone for today. You get tomorrow, you get to go back to practice, you get to work on things again. Like the, the bedroom's for sleep, like, the kitchen's for eating. And it's like,
Yeah.
the living room might be for watching TV, playing video games with your guys. Like just, it's not the ballpark. So when you leave, you left. You're gone. Like you're done. Move on.
Yeah, and we are so results driven as baseball players, as athletes,
Hmm.
where we're so caught up in our heads about how did I perform? How did this go? How were the results? Where at the end of the day, if you look back at your body of work in college, your teammates aren't going to remember your stats, right? They're not going to be like, "Oh, Matt hit 320 his sophomore year," whatever it is. Like, no one's going to remember your exact stats. No one's going to remember all of that. What they're going to remember is if you worked hard, how you treated everyone else, what kind of teammate you were, how you were off the field. It's all of those other factors that are going to matter more in the grand scheme of the relationships you make and whether or not people on your team respect you more, right? It's not like you perform well and then you have teammates that are like, "Oh, that's the guy that I want to be like." It's like, "Okay, well, how is he as a teammate? How is he as a leader? How is he as a friend? How is he off the field?" Like, there's so many other factors that we just forget about completely when we're in it because it's like, oh, not a good start. What do I do? First thing I do. How do I make these results better? It's like, okay, well, what did I do? Maybe my process for the week was completely fine. Maybe you have a bad start. That's totally fine. It happens all the time. Sometimes you don't have to reconstruct everything. It's just, all right, this is where I was. Now let's go back to the process again. It's worked the rest of the year. Why would I try to change it all now? Could be a few things. All right, maybe the pitch selection I had was not correct. Maybe I don't know. I was throwing too many first pitch balls. Whatever it was, there are slight adjustments you can make, but your process can't get reconstructed over something that is strictly results driven. You know?
100%. And another thing that everyone remembers is just what y'all did as a team. Like
Yep.
that's above any other individual accolade. Like no one's gonna remember who's all tournament. Like
Yeah.
even if you had the best tournament possible, they're gonna be like, we lost in championship, or hey, we won the championship. Like no one's gonna be like, oh, and Brandon hit 10 jacks in like the
Yeah.
playoff
Yeah.
series. Like no one's gonna remember that. Like they will, but like they're not gonna be like, that's not gonna be the first thing that is brought up. It's gonna be like,
Of course.
no, we won the championship. Like so, yeah. At the end of the day, it's just like it's not about you, and like whatever you had as a regular season, it's in the past. Move on, Now it's like, what can you do to help us win a championship? The stakes they rise so much, like once you get there and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think kind of another thing that it kind of ties in with the process that we were talking about is a piece of advice that I would give that I definitely did off and on in college that I should have done more that I've started to implement now is make a weekly schedule and then make a daily schedule every day when you wake up. Because I truly think, especially in college, like you said, you have assignments, you have practice, you have lifts, you have everything that you need to do. Make a weekly schedule, whether that's on a Sunday night, whether that's on a Saturday, you pick the day. Make a weekly schedule. Make a rough weekly schedule and be like, okay, this is what my week looks like from an outside view, right? From a bird's eye view. Bang, this is what it looks like. Then every morning, make your schedule and list the things that you want to get done, right? List those things, look at the calendar that you have, look at your time, and schedule those things in, right? Maybe it's a lift. Maybe I'm a morning lift guy. Maybe I'm going to lift every morning at 6 a.m. and that's what I want to do, right? Boom. Schedule that in, 6 a.m. That's when I'm going to lift. That's what I like to do. Then I go to class, have practice, bang. Because I feel like once you have those time blocks put in place, especially for me, who's someone that my brain always goes everywhere, it helps you focus because it's like, all right, well, from 9 to 11, this is study time, and I need this study time. From 12 to 3, this is practice time, and this is when I can give my all to practice. Then all of your focus in this one thing because you made these time blocks that's like, okay, now I can do this. Okay, and then now the day's done. From 8 to 9, you have recovery, whatever it is, whatever you like to do. You go to the sauna, great. You're a night lift guy, great. You go lift, whatever it is. Once you schedule that out, if you can stay consistent with a routine, that'll make it really easy over the course of the season. And I think I would go back and forth in college with having a good routine and not, where sometimes I'd be a little bit more dialed than others. And again, you do have to be flexible in college because things change all the time. You'll have busy weeks with school, you'll have busy weeks with baseball, you'll have busy weeks with whatever. But making that routine and just having that, I feel like it's like you have a blueprint and it's like, all right, all I have to do is follow the script and now I'm good to go. Like I can just do that. And over the course of a season, you'll see how much you can actually get done.
Love that because also like it ties back to like being present too because it's just like you are assigning yourself a time slot to be in a specific place and like if you're there like mentally you're also going to probably be there because you've seen it. You're like, hey, I'm putting myself here. You arrive in that place, you do what you need to do, and then you're off to the next thing on the task. So it's like it's almost helping train yourself get into like this mind state where it's like, okay, like I'm this doing this 8 to noon, right? Like, and it actually really, I think that's tremendous, and I think that helps. That's going to help a lot of people, like not only our age but college players, high school players. Like, I think anyone can benefit from something like that for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like that gives you more of an emphasis on daily progress than
Mm-hmm.
results. Like I'm not saying all of these time blocks is going to give me a 1.8 ERA. Like that's not what it is, but it's
Right.
you can look at the if you schedule every day and you're getting things done during those time blocks that you set out to do. When you look at it at the end of the week, it's like, wow, look how much I accomplished during the week. And without even knowing, you every single day you're getting better at something, whatever it is. And it's like same thing. I feel like a big thing in college is lifting during the season, right? It's a lot of guys are like, I don't have the time. Okay, well, make the time, schedule the time, right? Because over the course of the season, let's call the season 3 months, let's say, right? So that's 12 weeks. Let's say you lift twice a week. That's it, right? For someone that says, I can't lift, I can't get them in. 12 weeks, twice a week, that's 24 lifts. That's someone got 24 lifts when you got zero. Think about over the course of the season, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That can make or break someone's season, Like
100%.
it's scheduling those things on a daily basis that are going to get you better, whether that's lifting, whether that's getting your throwing in, if you're the one scheduling your throwing, if you have a pitching coach, phenomenal. They can also work with you and pair with you about what your daily routine is going to look like. Sticking to a routine throughout the year will show that progress and growth. And also, it's something where at the end of the year, when you get to playoffs, right, you have such a consistent routine that it's just, all right, just keep following the script, keep doing what you're
Right.
doing. And again, obviously, it's dynamic whether you play college, high school, pro ball. Your schedule is going to be dynamic. It's going to switch around. It's going to move back and forth. You're not going to have the same schedule every week. But making that weekly schedule in the beginning where it's like, okay, well, this week we're going to be loaded up on games. This week I'm going to be loaded up on, homework. Because if you're not doing that, and then come Wednesday, you're like, crap, I didn't get a lift in because I was focused on homework the last 2 days. It's like, well, that's pretty important. That's a pretty important thing that you skipped. You know what I mean? It's like, or it's
Right.
like, oh crap, like I didn't get the right recovery in that I needed. Like I didn't do my whatever it is. Some people like ice baths in the morning to kind of get their system going. Some people like the sauna at night to cool them down. Maybe they're like, wow, like I just didn't have time to do all that. Well, maybe if you mapped out your weekly schedule, you would have been able to allot some time here and there. And I feel like it's focusing on the main thing during the season, which is getting better every single day.
Agree. I agree. I love that.
Yeah, and I feel like in practice too. Now, I feel like during the season it gets long. There are some practices where you're going to feel like, why am I here? Truthfully, right? It's
Yeah.
like midweek practice. You're like, ugh. Especially sometimes the starting pitcher, you're like, I'm not really throwing or doing anything today. The thing with that is every day you need to go in with a plan, and every day you need to execute that plan because that's what you're going to do on game day. You can't go on game day and feel terrible and be like, you know what, I don't really want to try my hardest today. That's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
Every practice you got to go in with some sort of plan, whatever it is, whether I'm going to work on X, Y, and Z, I'm going to work on, I'm going to work on staying closed when I'm in the box. I'm going to work on executing my changeup more effectively on the mound, whatever it is. You have to have a game plan every single day, and it's Devin Smeltzer mentioned it in the interview, but he's like, it's the games within the games, right?
Yeah.
Practice is where you can go out and try some things. You can go out and execute things. You can mess with some grips if you want. This is more beginning of the season. I wouldn't start trying to toy with that in the middle of the season when you're in your flow. But you can start implementing some things and you can start working on things in practice. That's like the game inside the game. You're trying to get better during practice. And I feel like taking each practice as an opportunity to get better and prepare for the games is ultra important. I feel like I was lucky enough in college where we had a group of guys that did do that, where
Right.
um, we did every day implement things to try and get better and execute. So then on whatever day it was, Thursday, Friday, doubleheader Saturday, we're winning games and we're putting out the results that we want. But I think every day you have to come prepared with something to get better with. And I feel like as a coach too, it's the same thing, right? It's easy to say, oh, it's just a BP day, right? We're just going to take this light. But a lot of times there are things that you still need to work on. There are things that you need to get better at because come playoff time, you can't be taking it easy. It can't just be like, BP day. Obviously lighter practice days are important at times, right? To, keep people loose, keep them ready. But overall, there are things you still need to work on. It can't be like BP day, everyone just let it fly. Let's go, let's go. Like, you still have to go in there ready to execute each practice. Thank you for listening to the ARC podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave in Marlton, New Jersey.
Tell them Matt and Brandon sent you. We appreciate all your support. Thank you for listening, and back to the podcast. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you play like you practice, right? At the end of the day. So, like, if you're in practicing, guys aren't diving, sliding, hustling. Don't expect it come game time, right? So, like, especially, like, if you're a playoff team, granted, that might not necessarily be any of, like, the issues you have. But, like, at the same time, it's like it goes down to like what you said, like the execution parts, like making sure guys are getting bunts down, making sure that guys are getting good jumps, getting good reads, like on ground balls, fly balls, anything like that. And it can be lighter, but those light practices can be like almost like a heavy maintenance at the same time, like making sure that like the reads are good, making sure that you're getting a good first jump. It doesn't have to be these all out practices when you get down to that point, but like they still have to have like some type of like significance, some type of like point to them, so that when you do roll into the game, like it's like filling up your car. Like that one practice is like your first gallon in your tank and everything, and then the next one,
Yeah.
and then the next one, until you get to like a full tank by the time you get to game day. But if you got this luxury sports car and you're putting regular in it, like it's probably not going to run that well when it comes
Yeah.
time to race. So like you
Yep.
got to make sure you're fueling it up like the right way and everything. And like sometimes you only got $10 to throw into the gas tank. Sometimes you got 20, right? So it's like you take with what you got and you just do it. And then you go ahead and make sure that like it's the right type of gas. You're not putting diesel in a Ferrari. Like make sure it's the right type of gas that are going in there. So on game day, like engine's good, like we're good to go. Like you can just go off and like play, and like you don't have to worry about like, oh man, I wish we did this at practice, or oh man, I wish we could do this a little bit better and everything like that. Like you kind of already done it to that point and everything, so you kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, and I think creating a competitive environment in practice is so important because that's what's going to prepare you. And I like it's very cliche, I guess, but when we're talking about like the Last Dance documentary, the Bulls practices that they talked about, where they're like, well, like the practices were so hard that on game day, like it felt easy, it felt
Yeah.
natural, it felt like there was nothing. And I think Roger Clemens had said the same thing about his start days, where he's like, start days were the easy day. Like every other day, I was pushing my body to the absolute limit. So then on start day, it's like, all right, well, this is the fun. This is where I get to go out and compete. Like creating that competitive environment where you're one, not only competing against your teammates, but you're competing against yourself is, I think, extremely important. But also thinking about it and going through our conversation, how do you balance creating a competitive environment every day, but then also implementing days where you know it's designed to avoid burnout a little bit because it is true, right? I mean, if you're in a very stressful environment every single day, right? Like at some point it's gonna blow over, it's gonna pop. So how do you navigate, today we do need a BP day. Today we do need pitchers to come get a lift in and that's it. Whatever it is. Like how do you navigate the two between the competitive environment and then maybe implementing a little bit more of a stress-free practice?
I think at the end of the day, I think you can have like those laid back, like stress-free practices, but include some type of competition in them. Like you can do a BP
Yeah.
day and like make it target practice, or like we did it the
Yeah.
one time at Camden County. We split up the outfield and everything, right? And like if
Yeah.
you hit the ball between the big part of the field, gap to gap, like you get 5 points. And then you can have them in their hitting groups and like see which hitting group gets the most points, or mix up the hitting groups and have someone from each of your groups that does something a little bit different. Like in the rounds, like they go
Yeah.
up together, and line drive backside is 3 points, or getting the bunt down in the hula hoop is like 2 points. So like you're still getting your work in, you're still technically hitting BP, but at the same time, like you're almost like you're competing, but also what you're doing, like you're increasing that focus aspect too, because no one wants to ever lose, right? I've never met someone
Yeah.
that's like, dang man, I can't wait to lose today. Like,
Yeah.
everyone goes out, it's like trying to compete. And yeah, I think the best thing about like competition is just like it breeds competitors. Like at the end of the day, if you're competing, guys go up in there and they're like, okay, like when you ask them to do a task, that you've practiced and you've competed to get good results of in practice, they're more likely to succeed once they kind of get into that spot, like an actual game, right? Like, so I always love the mentality, like practice has to be harder than like the game. So like when you get into the game, you're like, oh man, all right, already seen this, or like, oh, this is worse than what I've seen and everything like that. Like it's just kind of like you're building battle wounds. By the time you get in there, you can just kind of like play, react, and just kind of go from there and everything. But yeah, I think even on the lighter days, like you can be a little less taxing on the body, but like let's pick it up with like the mind aspect. Like let's try to pick up some focus. Let's try to get these guys a little bit more like locked in on these light days and everything like that. Make them go out, make them compete, make them see something that they wouldn't see in like a typical like light practice or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that was a good point where you're saying, you can still create competition, whether it's a light practice or not. And there are still, mindfulness mental techniques that you can apply when you're not doing something at 100%, whatever it is, right? It's like, it's still challenging yourself. And it could be something like, all right, pitchers, like today's a light day. We're not going to do anything on the field, but we're going to go in and we're going to watch video. We're going to implement video and we're going to see, okay, like something I wish I did was for me when I was on the mound. I think a lot of times when I would get into some ruts, some, issues, I was going so fast, which when you're going good, it's great. Get the ball, bang, go. Get the ball, bang, go. Strike, 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 perfect. But when you're bad and you're doing the same thing, it can explode pretty quick and snowball, right? It's get the ball, go, ball, get the ball, go, ball. It's like you're not really sitting there and I guess focusing on that. You're not really making any adjustments. And I wish you could go back and just look at video and be like, hey, you just threw 4 pitches in 12 seconds. Like, bang, you got the ball, go, 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 go. It's like, take a deep breath. And I feel like focusing on that could be very beneficial to someone's mental prep rather than, okay, like maybe I felt like my curveball didn't work this week. It's like, no, you actually just threw 20 pitches in 10 minutes and you were go, 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 go. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. And then you can kind of watch yourself and see how you go. And I feel like hitting's the same, right? You can watch yourself in the box. Okay, what did I do this at bat? I took the first pitch fastball. I turned around and I slammed the bat on the ground. And it's like the at bat's not over. You just gave up. You know what I mean? It's like there are some there are some other things that you can implement that I feel like mentally can get you prepared where physically it's not super demanding, but it's still in a competitive nature. It's like, okay, this is what didn't work and this is what I can take away. It's like, all right, I can take a huge deep breath between each pitch and that would help a ton. When I get ball one, ball two, step off the mound, reset, gather your thoughts, and then come back. Like, I feel like there is that extra implementation that I don't know. I feel like a lot of schools might not pursue, might not implement, but that could be like a huge tool. Just looking at that, because again, we're so prone to looking at our mechanical videos, but how are we handling like any obstacles in the game? It's the same thing. Maybe pitcher has a rough inning, has a rough at bat, walks the guy, rolls his eyes, goes back. Like bad body language, and it could be like, all right, how do we adjust that? Because clearly you lost it mentally, right? You're not in it anymore. How do we come up with the tools in order to get you back on track? Like I feel like that would be a good implementation during like a quote unquote lighter practice where you could focus on adapting and using some of those mental skills to your advantage.
For sure, for sure. I think anytime you get to kind of see yourself act, I think it's always going
Yeah.
to be a benefit, right? Like
Yeah.
positive or negative, like you get to see the good and the bad, but you also like being a performance coach, or if you're you're coaching the actual sport itself, and like you have a guy and like you can show them back like what they look like in success and what they look like and when they're in neutral, or what they look like when they're like in the negative aspect, like you can kind of sit there and like almost coach them through it, but you also get to see what's underneath their hood and kind of see if they care, or if they're like whatever, they don't see an issue with it, right? Like you never know, but like once they see themselves, I'm sure a lot of people will be like, I didn't know it looked that way. Let me clean this up, the next time, or I kind of get into that spot, and you can adjust a little bit off of that.
Yeah, no, and I feel like a lot of guys, they always quote they black out during the game. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like you're on the mound and you don't even remember what happened until after the game. It's like, oh, I don't even know. Like you're not even aware of it when you're in it, where it's like, oh, I feel like mentally I was dialed in today. And then you look back, like you said, you look back at the tape and it's like you walk the first guy and all you see is like head back. You see eye rolls, you see like big size, whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, well, let's see, did you do anything after that to make an adjustment to correct that? And it's like, no, you're just pacing around the mound, like getting ready for the next guy. It's like, okay, well, maybe there's other things we can implement now that you think in your head are mechanical, but are definitely not mechanical. You know what I mean? It's like all your prep work going into that week in your bullpens, you threw amazing. But then what happened in the game? It's like, oh, well, I walked one guy and then that snowballed, and then I walked three guys, and then two guys got a hit, and then I just wasn't able to come back from that. It's like, well, it doesn't really sound like a mechanical issue. You know what I mean? It's like, but a lot
Yeah,
of guys, that's the first thing they go to is, it was a mechanics issue. That's what I'm going to try to change first.
and that should be the last thing, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that it gets paired with a lot of guys don't know how to make the mental adjustments to get ready, and I feel like since we're young, people get lessons for pitching, lessons for hitting, lessons for fielding. So the first thing when everyone it goes wrong, right, is I got to go see my hitting coach. I got to go see my pitching coach. I got to go see my infield coach. And it's like, all right, well, we worked on this drill, so maybe if I like now implement this drill live in game, like I'll be able to fix it real quick and get back to where I need to be. It's like, well, maybe it's not the physical adjustment that you need to make. It's more towards the mental side of it. You know what it is? Like it's taking a deep breath. It's working on your breath work. It's working on neutral thinking. It's working on whatever helps you, but it's finding that and being able to implement that in game.
Yeah, not using your trainer and instructor as a crutch, like
Yes.
being able to kind of like breathe, take a step back. Like the work has been the work. Like just sometimes you just need to mentally like reset and just go from there, and just like not think that like everything you do is, like you said, like is in the mechanic aspect like of the game. Like because more often than not, it's never really physical. Like if you're at a level, like it's kind of because you belong there. Maybe you do need to mature a little bit physically. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like you can always like work on your mental. You can always just kind of like adjust off of that and kind of go from there. And I think the hardest part for young athletes is just kind of like making that adjustment until you have failure. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yep.
biggest thing. Like everyone
Yep.
kind of sits there and it's like, you have a plan until Mike Tyson, you have a plan until you get punched in the face, right? Like it's the same thing. Like until I'm hitting 220, everything was unicorns and rainbows, man. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
then that happens and you're like, "Oh, something's wrong here." Right?
Yeah.
And like it could be approach, which half the time approach is mental. I mean, not half the time, all the time approach is
Yeah.
mental. Like
Yeah.
it's mental.
Yep.
It's what
Yep.
you set out to do mentally, and then you have to execute that physically, right? So it's like, a lot of guys are like, "Oh, my swing was bad today," and it's just like, well, I mean, you hit every single ball when it was about to touch the catcher's glove. Like you're late. Like that's what you call being late. Like your timing's off. What's your approach? Oh, I didn't have one. That's why you're late. Or I was thinking, if you think you're late, like it's just, it just snowballs and everything like that. And like more often than not, the guys never want to admit that because it's not talked about enough. Guys rarely want to admit that, like, okay, it's up here. They're just like, oh, well, if I got a better swing off, and it's like, yeah, but like this is what prevented you from getting that swing off. Like your
Yeah.
mental is going to prevent your physical. So like address the mental before you address the physical, and then go from there. Sometimes you will have to make a mechanical change, but like at the end of the day, like that's more often down the line rather than like the upfront and everything like that.
Yeah, and I feel like a big misconception that younger guys especially have is when you think about the mental prep for the game, their first thing when they think about like mindfulness and mental prep is breath work, is meditation, is mantras, things like that. And all of that is great and it is part of that, right? It's a big piece of that, but it's also how you prepare for the game. And it's like you got rocked and it's like, oh, maybe my mechanics weren't great and it's like, oh, well, how did you prepare? It's like, what do you mean? Like how did you scout this team that you were pitching against? Oh, I didn't. It's like, well, how do you expect to go succeed if you knew nothing about the opponent that you were going against? You know what I mean? It's like that's a huge part of the mental prep. That could be a part of your daily scheduling. It's like, all right, I start on Saturday. I'm going to spend at least an hour each day doing my scouting report on this team. Luckily, when I was in college, the starting pitcher would have to do the scouting report for the team he was pitching against, which was nice. That was good. But again, like Devin Smeltzer talked about it when we were on our episode. When he got called up to the bigs, he had this whole little book that he brought to the catcher and the manager and was like, "Here, like these are my notes on like all the guys." And they were kind of at first like, "What the heck is all this?" Like, but they respect that, and his mental prep was like above and beyond. That's unbelievable. It's like again, you have to go in with some sort of preparation in order to succeed because again then you get rocked and you're like well I think my curveball wasn't working I don't think my back keep was getting through on the mound I think I wasn't driving into the ground I wasn't using whatever my hip shoulder separation was off whatever stupid things that they could say that's like this is why it didn't work it's like well you just weren't prepared mentally. Clearly, you didn't have anything to go into understanding what's this team's weaknesses. What have they seen before? What haven't they seen before? How can I get ahead? And the other part of the mental prep is working on all of that in practice throughout the week. Where like you said, I think the biggest thing is, the first time you get punched in the face, how you going to react. And my freshman year at TCNJ, in the fall, I pitched awesome. I pitched really well. And going into that meeting, the coach was like, head coach, Dean Glass was like, you're going to be a starter this season. Great. First start of the year, I think I went 2 innings, 5 walks, let up 6 runs, something terrible. Got pulled after two. I don't even think I made it through the second, but got pulled after two. And from there, I was kind of lost because I had pitched so well all fall, I had pitched so well all preseason that it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, you're not ready for that moment where it's like in practice, when you fail, understand that, okay, this is a moment where I can grow and develop because I'm going to fail at points this year. And it's going to be how I bounce back from this moment, not avoiding it completely because everyone, the best hitter, the best pitcher are going to go through slumps. They're going to go through instances where they face some sort of obstacle. And it's how you're going to be able to respond and how mentally prepared you are for that moment. And everything in practice leads up to that. Whether that's in the gym and you're struggling in a lift, maybe the strength coordinator has something for you where it's like, all right, deadlift, I'm just giving theoreticals, deadlift 315 for 7. You can only get 5. It's like, okay, well, I didn't get 5. What didn't I do correctly? Maybe I didn't get my sleep. Maybe I didn't do X, Y, and Z. There's so much that goes into it
Right.
that, okay, I didn't throw well in this bullpen. How do I adjust and get ready for the next one? Or in live ABs, you're facing your teammates, right? Walk the first guy. Okay, take a deep breath, reset, get ready for the next batter, right? Each batter is independent of the one previous. And it's like, okay, now I'm ready to go. Let's do this. But if you're not practicing that, of course, when you're in the game and it happens for the first time, you're going to be completely lost. You have no idea what's going on.
Yep. I mean, and that's the thing. It's just like, like I know we're talking a lot like in season stuff and everything. It's just like it starts out of season, like making
Yeah.
sure that your mental is good enough so that when the first instance in season happens, like you're more prepared now to like go through it and like, okay, everything I did in the off season has led now to this moment. I'm not having my results. Mentally, where do I go? Like, do I run from it? Do I need to check my stats every 5 minutes, even though they haven't changed? Like, what is it that I need to do to be able to move on and like into like the next part and everything like that? And like, that's the biggest piece of it. But once you get in season, if you did nothing in your prep in your preseason to like mentally get on this mountaintop, right? Like then when you have those issues, like you're going to naturally go to the results. You're going to naturally go to what my body is doing because it's a physical sport. Like you're going to not address anything like the mental side because like you're kind of ignorant to
Yeah.
that side of things. Like you're not really thinking on the mental side. You're not thinking at all, or you
Yep.
are overthinking and you're
Yep.
thinking about all the wrong things. So it's like it's so important that it's just like you are going to struggle at some point in the season, right? If you hit 450, well, you got out 6 of 10 times, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
you're still very good, but like your struggle personally is not getting to your fifth hit out of your 10 at bats. Like that would be like your struggle, and that might not look like a struggle to some, but it could be as simple as you go 2 for 3, and then you go into the back end of a doubleheader, and you're like you go 2 for 5, and it's just like, well, I could have had a third, I could have had a hit, but I K'd up looking because I kind of just I just wasn't thinking, or I kind of blacked out, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but like if you're mentally trained, like you avoid those aspects. Not that it's going to help you hit 500 because that's hard to do, but at the same time, it's going to when you get to that point of I blacked out, or I got to I lost focus, or I'm in a slump right now. Like if you took care of that on the back end, like once you get to that point, you're like, okay, but this is how I get back from that. This is how I bounce back from that. This is how I move on from this. And like it's a lot easier than you can put together like a full body of work rather than like a game or two
Yep.
games or a
Yep.
week. Like it just helps you be able to go out and perform over a longer period of time and everything.
Definitely. And it's embodying that ideology that we've talked about a couple times of neutral thinking, where it's taking things as they come and then making adjustments accordingly, right? And that applies in game. That's not just like, okay, I had a bad start. It's okay, I walked someone and now what do I do from here, right? Okay. And again, the idea of neutral thinking is just objective thinking about what is happening, what's taking place. You walked one guy, it's like, all right, well, I understand the body of work that I've put in. Like you just said, I've put in the work that I need to put in. So that should give me the confidence to now say, okay, I'm ready to attack this guy. I walked that last hitter, but that's okay because I'm ready to go for this guy. It's it's taking each thing as they come, and I feel like that's super important. And I mean, we've stressed it so much. The season is so long. If you're able to implement that in the beginning of the year, by the end of the year, it's going to feel completely natural. Like it's just another thing you're doing. Like it's it's so important. It's everything.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, and I just feel like a lot of times throughout the year, right? The things a lot of people physically make sure that they're recovered and ready to go. A lot of guys, at least that I played with, are focusing on eating healthier, focus on getting more sleep. Really trying to dial in everything physically, but mentally, man, it's it's something that gets lost in the weeds a lot of times, and the detachment especially is really important so you can come back and your body battery's at 100 and you feel ready to go and you can give it your all. Staying neutral throughout the year so as things come along you're ready to go, and then applying mental preparation in practice so then when the season comes, or applying it in the beginning of the year so when the end of the season comes you feel like an expert, you're dialed in, you're ready to go. I feel like that's just ultimately what's going to put you up for the most success that you can have throughout the year.
100%. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. It's just like, at the end of the day, it's like you have to take care of your brain. Like you really have to take care of your brain. And there's so many things that go into like the mental side, right? Like we provided a ton of examples and everything like that, and it's just like there's so many different things that add up into that mental side. Sleep, like making sure that like your relationships are healthy, like your family's healthy, like you're getting good grades so that you can go and do something at like such a high level. And like at the end of the day, it's just like you have to practice it too. Like you practice the physical, you practice the mental. And like I think one way, I want you to talk a little bit about like just like what is a way that somebody who's in high school, a young athlete that hasn't gotten into or hasn't been exposed to this yet, right, from like a mental side, how can they go and like better their mental, or what would be the first step for them to kind of be able to start walking in this path and everything.
Yeah, I think the first thing, truthfully, is accountability. And whether that's you looking yourself in the mirror or you working with someone that can help you and understanding where your mental deficiencies are, like you would understanding where your physical deficiencies are, right? Like if you were to go work with a pitching or hitting coach, like the thing that you want to work with is okay, where am I weak and where can I improve? And mentally it's got to be the same thing. And everyone's completely different, right? Some people are very very monotone and it's like maybe they just want a little bit more energy, passion. They kind of want to express themselves differently, but there's a little bit of self doubt where they're like, I always need to be at this certain level. And then other guys are extremely passionate and emotional on the other side, where you strike out, slam the bat, you walk a guy, head back, roll your eyes, you're upset. And everything from there is the first step is accountability and understanding. Okay, one, what do I look like? Two, how can I improve? Three, how is this harming my game? Because I think that's the most important thing is when you're young especially, you don't understand how much that harms the game. Harms your game, I should say, right? Like you could have one bad at bat and that could ruin the rest of the game if you're not mentally dialed in, if you don't understand there are certain things you can put in place in order to overcome that, right? And it's taking things, and the simplest advice is taking things pitch by pitch, inning by inning, out by out, whatever you want to do. It's taking things one at a time, right? Each pitch is independent of the previous one. And it's a really hard concept to understand because, especially at a young age, man, everything feels so important, right? You're in that high school game and you strike out in front of all your teammates and you're in a big spot, right? It's the end of the world because that's the biggest thing in your world at that time, you know? But it's understanding, okay, I struck out. I have a whole nother at bat, right? I have a whole nother opportunity to go up there and do what I know I can do. And that comes with understanding you prepared for that moment physically and mentally that off season. And it's okay, I'm dialed in. I've put in hours of work on the field. I'm confident there. And I've held myself accountable now, and I understand. Typically the old me would slam my bat, and I'd get pissed off, and I'd go into the field, and I'd take ground balls and airmail them and throw them 100 miles an hour at my first baseman because I'm upset. But now the new me takes this as an opportunity to get better. It's implementing accountability and having that growth mindset. The growth mindset is ultimately the most important thing. And I think you and I also had a transitional period in high school where at one point we both didn't have that mindset, and then it kind of flipped without knowing what it was. It flipped into what would be a growth mindset. But at one point, both of us, when we faced adversity, would probably turn the other way and cower down. But then once our backs were against the wall, we both got hurt at the same time, and we were ready to take that next jump. We kind of learned, okay, every day I can do something to get myself better. And I think mentally it's the same exact way. And some guys it's breath work, right? It's that example I just gave. A guy on the mound, he throws 12 balls in 4 minutes because he's grabbing the ball, go, grab the ball, go, grab the ball, go. And it's said, hey, you're going way too fast. And it's great when you're on top of the world, but the problem is when you're not, everything's going to snowball and get worse. We can implement some breath work techniques to make sure, okay, you throw two balls in a row, you can step off the mound, give yourself a deep breath, do some box breathing, do whatever helps you to get ready to go back on the mound and go, okay, I'm reset, I'm ready to go. It's reframing that self doubt, right? It's saying, instead of thinking, boom, all right, oh man, I'm going against this guy. I can't throw anything with conviction because all my thoughts are, what if I lose this guy? What if I get rocked? What if I'm not good enough to go against this guy? And it's reframing to we've talked about, what if I strike him out? What if I execute every pitch the way that I want? What if my mechanics are dialed in and everything is perfect right now? What if I feel great, right? It's flipping the other side of, okay, instead of going from self-doubt, what if I win? What if I
Right.
execute this? What if I dominate? It's flipping the script, and you know, obviously reframing is a lot easier in theory than in actuality, and I think that comes with a body of work that you need to put in physically as well, right? Like if you haven't put yourself in those situations, if you haven't put in the work, I don't blame you for not being able to say, okay, let's flip the script and see if I can think this way. But they go hand in hand, right? Like you said, it the first thing everyone goes to is let's see what we can change physically. But mental and physical go hand in hand, and if you can execute both of those things at a high level, you're going to be a really really good athlete no matter what sport you're playing.
Love that, man. That's awesome. That
Yeah,
is
no, I
awesome.
mean, I wish a lot of those tools I focused more on when I played as a younger guy, but um, yeah, it's and the younger you are, the harder it is to grasp,
Mm-hmm.
and
100%.
it's tough, and everything when you're younger you feel like is the most important thing in the world, and if you don't perform that day, it's easy to get snowballed into not performing the way you want. But there are some simple things you can implement that can really help you go a long way. And it's not going to correct everything. I'm not trying to sit here and say, "Oh, I'm going to breathe on the mountain now I throw 98 and I'm going to strike everyone out." But there are things that can help you get in a better mindset to attack more effectively, whether that's at the plate or on the mound or at the quarterback position as an offensive lineman, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can get beat on the offensive line on one play and you think it's the end of the world, your quarterback got sacked, you just looked like an idiot. But you could block them the rest of the game and not let up another sack, right? Like the opportunity is there. And it's just how you respond to the moment, right? Of failing at first. It's just how do you bounce back? How do you implement that? So yeah, but as a young guy, it's just it's tough at first, but if you really put in the work, I think it'll do wonders. And if you can understand that at a younger age, that's going to go so beyond anything else as you continue throughout your athletic career and then into whatever you proceed to do after that as well.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. It it's interesting trying to, I guess, maximize your season throughout the year because it is such a long season no matter the sport. But I feel like there were some good points back and forth there where we were able to kind of give people some tools that they can implement and make sure that they're um, kind of applying that so they can stay present throughout the season.
Absolutely. And by the time you get to the end, that's the new beginning, right? So, it's just all about just honing in and then making sure that our mental is as bulletproof as possible for the next, 4 to 6 games. And then, you make a regional, you make a super, you make a College World Series, wherever you're at in your playoffs, that then it restarts again by the time you make it to that next round and everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
it's just like a season at the end of the day.
Oh, definitely. 100%. 100%. But yeah, I think that was a good episode. I think we tied in a lot of good mental and physical prep advice for guys going throughout a long season. So definitely a fun episode. And Matt, I appreciate the conversations we had back and forth, and hopefully some of the people listening can have some cool takeaways from what we talked about. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Have a good one, guys.